In the Door of Light, I spoke about the opportunity that we're all going to have in the very near future to ascend. And I spoke about the Door of Light being the way that we are invited to participate in the ascension process. At the same time, in that little book, I published a prediction by Yeshua in regard to the ascension. So what I want to do is to talk a little bit more about the ascension process from a physics standpoint today, so that you get a better understanding of the ascension, how it operates, the different types of ascension, and also why ascension is going to occur in our day and age. So there are basically two types of ascension as described by Yeshua. The first type is where the consciousness of a human being is lifted out of this dimension, which is called the third dimension, into the fifth dimension. And whilst the consciousness is dissociated from the physical body is maintained in a comatose state, in a state of trance or a state of rapture. It's rather like a very deep state of sleep. And the experience we have of the ascension is very real, very vivid, but you could liken it to a dream that is more of a wakened state than a dream state. So the second type of ascension is where the body is lifted out of physical space-time into a higher dimension. And the way it operates is what I want to explain in this episode of The Door of Light. So, why is the ascension predicted for our time? Well, at this particular time in human history, we are confronted by two events which have a very similar origin, which I'm going to explain. And these two events do threaten our civilization. The first event doesn't threaten life and limb. The first event threatens the survival of our electric civilization and the survival of the internet, but it doesn't do any harm to people or animals, and it's an event that has occurred before many times. It occurs about once a century. It's an electric storm originating from the sun. The second event is a threat to life and limb. It occurs about once every 6,500 years, and it is in fact a pole shift. According to the Earth sciences, less than 10,000 years ago, the rivers were flowing in Antarctica and the pole was over Hudson Bay. But it wasn't a North Pole, it was a South Pole. And something happened less than 10,000 years ago to cause the Americas to shift very suddenly 2,000 miles toward the equator, for the poles to reverse, and for the pole, which is now a North Pole, to resituate over the Arctic Ocean. That event was so sudden that mammoths living in Siberia that were pulled 2,000 miles toward the pole were deep frozen so suddenly and so quickly that when they were discovered in the melting permafrost in recent years by Siberian peasants, they were in such a good state of preservation that the peasants ate the mammoths even though they'd been deep frozen for thousands of years. But that is only possible if the process of freezing is more or less instantaneous. So we have to explain these extraordinary events somehow or other in the science that we have available to us. But one of the problems with science is that science is burdened with belief. Science is very similar to religion. It's a system of belief, and a lot of the ideas in science are not founded in experiment and in the contemporary understanding of science, but they're based on old ideas, ancient ideas. And the most notable of these is the materialistic philosophy, the idea that our world is formed out of minute little bits of grit, minute little bits of material substance. And this goes back to Democritus about 2,500 years ago. And the blind faith in materialism is really what blocks us from understanding these processes that are about to befall us. And what I've done is I've spent the last 50 years of my life developing a completely new approach to physics. What happened is that when I was 16, I discovered in a book on ancient yogic philosophy that the smallest particles of matter are vortices of energy. So the model that I put forward is the ball of wool. What we have here is the wool is spinning on an infinite number of axes. The axis of spin is changing all the time, so that the wool winds around to form a perfect sphere. So this is a vortex. When, we mention the word vortex, people immediately think of that conical vortex that goes down the plug hole, or the toroidal vortex of a smoke ring, or, the vortex forming in a weather system like a hurricane. But actually, the ball of wool is a vortex. It's a three-dimensional spiral. So using the ball of wool model, we can put forward a type of vortex that is a perfect sphere, and it has no poles, no axis of spin that we can measure, because the poles are changing at the speed of light. The axis of spin is constantly changing, and therefore you can't measure it. And the thing is that this model for the subatomic particle explains why it is that particles of matter contain vast amounts of energy, because this is a very compact form of wool. And the ball vortex is a very compact form of energy. If I were to unravel this wool, I'd fill the room with wool. And so it is, if you unravel a subatomic particle of energy, you get vast amounts of energy released. And I'll be talking about that in a little while in regard to the events that are threatening us at this particular time. So, first of all, I'm going to use this model of the vortex to explain the second type of ascension, the physical ascension, where we leave the planet with our bodies. Essentially, in this model I'm presenting, subatomic particles of matter are not billiard balls of material substance, they are whirlpools of light. And this explains the idea that we're formed of light. We're formed of spinning light. And it's the spin of the light, the spin of the energy, that creates the illusion of mass. The ancient Indians called it Maya, the illusion of Maya, the illusion of forms. It's the form that creates the substantiality of our world. It's this spin, this form of spin, because spin creates inertia, it creates extension in 3 dimensions, it sets up all the properties that we attribute to the material world. So, if you like, we are deluded. We are deluded by spin. The very word these days is used to denote delusion. The spin doctor of politics. And Richard Dawkins wrote this book, The God Delusion. Well, actually, we're blighted not by a God delusion, but by a material delusion. And it's interesting that people make judgments which are predictions of their own situation. So it is the people that are deluded that write books about delusions. So it's materialistic scientists like Richard Dawkins who are deluded by spin who write a book called The God Delusion. Now, at the age of 4, I declared that I was going to prove the existence of God through science, and that is what I've done in this work. I've been able to show that subatomic particles are not material things. They are simply forms of activity. There's spin there, but there's nothing spinning. Because you see, energy is no thing. So if energy is spinning, it's nothing or no thing spinning. What you've got is a bit of speed spinning. What Einstein recognized as the most important thing about mass and space-time is the speed of the energy. That's why he said that everything in our world is relative to the speed of light, because everything is formed out of the speed of light spinning, and that is what sets up the third dimension we're in. It's the speed of the energy in this third dimension that sets up the physical state that we exist in at this time. So if you like, we're living on a plane of energy. This is what Hermes spoke of. Hermes spoke about the planes, and that's where the word planet comes from. And he also described us as human, God-man beings, or divine beings in material form. And again, that is what the ascension is all about. It's about our realizing our divinity, the spiritual aspects of ourselves, and becoming spiritual in bodily form. So how do we do that? How do we become a spiritual being in our bodily form? Well, first of all, let's get an understanding of what we mean by a spiritual being. A spiritual being is simply describing a being from the fifth dimension or the fourth dimension. That is, beings formed out of super energy. So what is super energy? Super energy is energy moving faster than the speed of light. We've been taught in the ancient times, the ancient folklore, if you like, that there are angels all around us, but we're not aware of them because they're moving too fast. So these angels, if you like, are extraterrestrial. They're extraterrestrial beings all around us, but we don't see them because they're moving too fast. And what that actually means is that there are beings around us formed of energy which cannot be contained within our physical space and time because the speed of the energy is too fast for us to perceive. And this is part of relativity. It's described in the Minkowski diagram, developed by a mathematician who taught Einstein his math, Minkowski, that you can't have speeds faster than the speed of light contained within a space-time continuum based on the speed of light. The only way that we can move out of the space-time continuum based on the speed of light is to accelerate the speed of energy in every subatomic particle of our bodies beyond the speed of light. So this is the idea of ascension, physical ascension, is that every single subatomic particle in our body undergoes a process whereby the speed of the energy in every subatomic particle of our body, spinning, accelerates to a speed faster than the speed of light. And what this acceleration means is it means there's no change in the physical form of the vortex. The vortices are the same. There's no change in their frequency of vibration, so there's no increase in temperature, and therefore the process is not destructive. If you were to increase the frequency of vibration in a body, you would cook it because that's an increase in temperature. So you see, I'm working as a physicist. The idea of increasing frequency of vibration we hear about in association with ascension is just a metaphor. It's not a literal truth. The way ascension happens to the physical body is by increasing the intrinsic speed of energy within every subatomic vortex within that body. And I call these speeds of energy the Einstein constants. So you increase the Einstein constant, you increase that basic speed. So the world, the universe, if you like, the dimensions are organized on planes rather like the quantum states in the atom, as above, so below. Hermes' great principle. Okay. So as above, so below, the universe is organized just like the atom. And just as the atom, you get these quantum states that are quite distinct. They're distinct energy states in the atom. So in the universe, you get these distinct energy states based on different speeds of energy. And we happen to be on a level, on a plane, based on one particular speed of energy, and our experience is limited by that speed, by the upper speed of energy, which we know as the speed of light. So whilst we're in a physical form, our science cannot go beyond that higher speed. However, it is possible for us to be taken beyond that higher speed. If you take a body based on the speed of light, a body in which every single subatomic particle is a vortex spinning at the speed of light, and you place it into a beam of energy in which the speed of the energy in the beam is faster than the speed of light, then through resonance, the speed of energy in the subatomic particles of the three-dimensional body will accelerate to the highest speed. And if that higher speed happens to be the speed of fifth-dimensional energy, which is 16 times the speed of light, then the physical body will cease to be a three-dimensional body. It will simply become instantly a five-dimensional body. Now, the interesting thing about this is the process of ascension is identical to the quantum leap in quantum physics. What happens to an electron when it takes a quantum leap from the ground state, the lower state, to the excited state, high state of energy in an atom? It vanishes off the ground state and reappears on the excited state. So it doesn't move between them. It disappears on one state and it pops up on the other. And this is what happens in ascension. You don't move between the planes. You as such, you disappear off one plane and pop up on the other. So it's an instantaneous process. And a very useful process, because once you're in the upper plane, you can then decelerate the speed of the energy and pop up somewhere else in the third-dimensional plane. So it's a way of translocating from one place to another in the universe. Very useful. It means you can travel between the galaxies instantly, travel between star systems instantly, by simply increasing the speed of energy in a body of matter and then decreasing it again. And this is what happens with UFOs. They disappear and then pop up somewhere else. And it's using this resonance process which I'm describing. So all of this is only possible to understand in terms of the vortex physics. You can't explain this in terms of a materialistic physics. And the materialistic physics is flat earth thinking, because anyone who still believes in materialistic physics, like so many so-called skeptics who don't think for themselves, they think the way they were taught to think at school, which is a materialistic way of thinking. That's where they're no different from, medieval religion based on blind faith. And what I'm showing here is that there is a basis for belief in the angels and in spiritual beings. Once you get a new understanding of the particle, subatomic particle, which is much more compatible with modern physics, with quantum physics, with Einstein's thinking, with relativity. Once you think of spin as the basis of matter, like Eric Laithwaite. Eric Laithwaite, who was a professor of physics, he worked at the Royal Institution, in the laboratory that Michael Faraday worked in. He was inventor of the monorail, magnetic rail, a great scientist, said that matter itself is just spin. And he also had developed a way of overcoming gravity through spin, which he demonstrated on television. So you see, the key to gravity, the key to magnetism is spin. So I've used the vortex theory to explain the resonance process whereby physical ascension is possible, whereby when you look at a door of light, when you look at the door of light, you will be looking in to the end of a fifth dimensional vortex resonance beam. And all you have to do is you have to step into that beam. And as you step into the beam, the speed of energy in every subatomic particle of your body will be accelerated to the speed of fifth dimensional energy, and you'll pop up in the fifth dimension. Or it may be that that is where you ascend into the fifth dimension. Many people will be ascended into the fourth dimension, which is based on twice the speed of light. So they'll be confronted with a fourth dimensional energy beam, but it'll look the same. The door of light looks the same, and it depends on where each person is destined to go. We have to just trust the process. Just step into the beam, and you'll find out afterwards whether you're in the fourth dimension or the fifth dimension. And at this moment of time, it doesn't really matter, okay? But I was talking about gravity. I was talking about Eric Lathwaite saying that the vortex is linked to gravity, that you can overcome gravity by spin. And I want to talk with you a little bit about this link between vortex energy and gravity, because that is the key to these two great events that are about to occur and are going to affect all of us and will necessitate ascension. When I was developing the vortex theory, I had a little problem. And the problem I had was to try to explain where all this spin came from and where it goes to. Because you've got all this energy spinning out of the central point, a point of singularity at the center of the subatomic vortex, and it spins out in one direction, and then it spins in another direction. And the spinning in is the basis of a negative charge. So a vortex in which the energy is spinning inwards is a negative charge, and a vortex in which the energy is spinning outwards is a positive charge. So if we imagine that this little ball of wool is an electron, it's a whirlpool of light forming an electron. All the energy is spinning into this little electron, and according to the model I put forward to explain where the hell the energy goes to and comes from, I've suggested that the energy spins into the center of the electron vortex, disappears through the center, and spins out the other side to form an identical little vortex in which the energy is spinning outwards. And that is a positively charged electron, and in physics it's called a positron. But a positron is a particle of antimatter. So I'm suggesting that beyond the center of every subatomic vortex of energy that we perceive in our world is a vortex of antimatter. So I'm suggesting that there's an antimatter version of me at this moment staring into an iPhone, and that you, on whatever device you've got at the moment, there's an antimatter version of you staring into an antimatter device. So what I'm saying is there's an antimatter iPhone on inside, if you like, beyond the inside of every subatomic particle making up this iPhone. So between matter and antimatter, there's a force of attraction. And that explains gravity. Because the pull is from the center of things, it creates a centralizing pull. So we're all experiencing this sticky pull that pulls us into the center of the planet. Now, this is a different theory for gravity to Albert Einstein's general theory of relativity. And you need to read my book, Awaken. So this is the book Awaken. and you can get this book off my website. And in that book, I will explain to you how I can use the vortex theory for gravity to explain the curvature of space that Einstein used to predict his theory of general relativity. So I'm replacing general relativity with this vortex theory for gravity. And I make a prediction coming out of this, if you like, there's a consequence of the vortex theory for gravity, which is really important, which is not in Einstein's general theory of relativity. And that's what I want to talk about now. Between matter and antimatter, there is not only a force of attraction, but there is a process called annihilation. And what happens is that the matter vortex unzips itself with the antimatter vortex. They unzip one another when they meet. And that unzipping produces 100% conversion of mass into energy. Now, in the hydrogen bomb, in the nuclear fusion, you get the conversion of about 0.7%. Around about 0.5% of the mass is converted into energy. Whereas in matter-antimatter annihilation, it's 100% of the mass, 200 times as much. So this is the most powerful source of energy in the universe. Absolutely colossal amounts of energy are released by annihilation. And what I'm actually saying is that through the center of matter, large bodies of matter, like our planet and the sun, at the gravitational center core of the sun, at the gravitational center core of our planet, and this applies to every planet and every star in the universe and every galaxy, matter and antimatter meet, and the annihilation process is going on. But the energy released can't escape, because the intense centers of gravity at the core of galaxies, at the core of stars, at the core of planets, those centers of gravity are black holes. Now, Stephen Hawking spoke about substellar black holes. He talked about mini black holes. You can have black holes everywhere. And I'm predicting black holes at the centers of stars and planets. And I'm actually predicting that there is a black hole at the center of the sun and a black hole at the center of the earth. And I'm saying that what's happening is that those black holes are continually fed with energy, the energy of annihilation. But that energy can't escape because, to begin with, the energy is swirling around inside the black hole. So the black hole itself is like a mega vortex, you see. It's just one of these on a massive, massive scale. And what happens is that the energy is gripped by this black hole, and it can't escape. It swirls around and around and around. That's why it's called a black hole. But eventually, the amount of energy accumulating from the annihilation exceeds the ability of the gravity to grip it. In other words, the black hole gets supersaturated with energy. Now, this model is only possible with the vortex theory, because it's only in the vortex theory that we predict the antimatter beyond the center of matter, simply because of this whole thing of the energy spinning into the center of the vortex and out the other side, like a sink and a squirt, if you see what I mean, back to back. So it's only in the vortex theory that this model fits. It doesn't go with the general theory of relativity. It doesn't go with materialistic theories for gravity. And it wasn't explained by or predicted by Newton in his theory for gravity. But what happens is this. The energy overcomes the ability of gravity to contain it and is released. And then the gravity of the black hole snaps back in on the energy. So you've got a geyser effect. It's like Old Faithful in Yellowstone Park. So let's go over it again. Through constant annihilation, you're constantly releasing, you're getting a constant release of energy, but it's huge amounts of energy, depending on the size of the black hole. And initially the energy is captured by the black hole until the energy overcomes the ability of the gravity of the black hole to contain it, and it's released, and then the gravity snaps back and the whole process begins again like a geyser. So I call this process the gravity geyser. Now, the thing about geysers is that there is a predictable periodic release of energy. The Old Faithful in Yellowstone Park, you can predict precisely when that geyser is going to blow. And that's the key to geysers, predictability of this energy release. So wherever you see sudden and cyclic energy releases, you know you've got a gravity geyser. Wherever you see gamma rays released, you know that you've got matter-antimatter annihilation. Gamma rays, X-rays, huge, very high energy particles, of energy, but especially gamma rays. Now, in my little book, The Door of Light, I talk about coronal mass ejections that have hit us once every 100 years. The thing is that the sun follows a periodic cycle of energy. What happens is that every 11 years we hit a solar maximum where there's sunspot activity. So you get a sudden build-up of energy, a release of energy, and then the sun goes quiescent again and goes back into a period of quiet. And then it builds up and builds up and builds up, and 11 years later, boom, it releases the energy again. And when the energy is released, it's vast. Now, the thing about the sun is when you look into those sunspots, there's nothing there inside the sun. It's black inside. It looks like a black hole inside. And I reckon, my prediction is that the surface of the sun is an event horizon of a black hole. And we're getting this gravity geyser effect happening on an 11-year cycle. And that's why the energy released by coronal mass ejections is so colossal. We were hit by one in 1859. It's called the Carrington event. And they estimated that the energy in that coronal mass ejection was equivalent to 475 billion nuclear bombs. Now, it didn't do any harm to anybody, surprisingly enough, because it wasn't heat. It was electrical energy. And in 1859, the only thing that they had going was these telegraph lines and telegraph stations. Now, they were badly affected. They were catching fire. They were, sparking. They were suddenly energy was appearing in the wires seemingly out of nowhere. But there were the northern lights going right the way down to the equator, and for 48 hours there was no night. The atmosphere was full of light. It was very beautiful, beautiful colours in the sky, but no one was hurt by it. This is a typical coronal mass ejection. The next one to hit us was 1921, just after the First World War. And interestingly enough, there was a pandemic just before that coronal mass ejection. History may be about to repeat itself, because we are due to be hit with another coronal mass ejection. One very nearly hit us in the last solar maximum of 2012, but we missed it by 9 days. But there's a lot of concern in the world of science that we're due for another one at any time. And the energy of the electrical energy released by coronal mass ejection is a threat not to us, but to our electric civilization. Basically, it could fry out the step-up, step-down transformers in the national grid, and it could do irreparable harm to the satellites upon which the internet is dependent. So we could find the internet goes down and we get a universal outage, blackouts, cessation of the distribution of electrical energy. And this is a major threat to our civilization because we depend on electrical energy and the internet for money, for the flow of goods and supplies, for food, for fuel, for transportation, for communication. And without electricity and without the internet, we would be back to the Stone Age. I mean, we haven't got the intermediate technologies that, that have all been lost between us and the Stone Age. So it's a very real threat. And that's where the first wave of ascension comes in. The first wave of ascension is predicted, according to the work of David Wilcock, is predicted to coincide with a coronal mass ejection. And another writer, William Henry, writes about the coincidence of the first wave of ascension with a coronal mass ejection, which the ancients called samvartikas. I love that word, samvartika. So again, it won't do any damage to life and limb, but it will be an answer to the prayer of Extinction Rebellion, that basically the whole march of corporate civilization will be brought to a halt. Artificial intelligence, 5G won't happen, the internet will be down, that whole madness will be brought to a halt. It won't be possible for people to wage war because the flow of arms will be stopped. But it will be difficult and challenging in terms of human survival, because it's very difficult for us to survive without food and water, because water also depends upon electrical energy for these pumping stations. And in London, the control of the water supply is it's all controlled by the internet. So if the internet goes down, the London supply flow of water would cease. So this is a cause for concern. So the idea in the first wave of ascension is that those of us that volunteer and step into the door of light, we will be taken into the fifth dimension, where we will be preparing ourselves in conferences with all the other people that come up. We'll work together as a team with the masters, with people like Yeshua and other great spiritual masters from the past, and the divine beings, and we will basically be coming back into our bodies between 2 and 48 hours later, after the coronal mass event has passed, the electric storm is over, and we will be given powers, which I explain in my book Awaken, whereby we'll be able to feed people and minister to their needs, where we're, things that were called miracles, like the feeding of the 5,000, that Jesus did. I explain in my book in terms of resonance. It's in terms of a superphysics. If we were to take these iPhones into the 18th century or the 15th century, back into the reign of Edward III that I happen to be reading about at the moment, they'd burn us at the stake. They'd think we're a bunch of witches. They wouldn't understand this technology. And so it is, we have to accept that there are sciences, there are technologies way in advance of our own. And it's this very advanced super science, super physics, these super technologies that are responsible for what we call miracles. You see, they'd think one of these iPhones would be an absolute miracle if we had a time machine and could go back into the Middle Ages, you see. They wouldn't be able to understand it. And we'd say, no, it's not a miracle. No God's behind it or anything. It's this technology we've got. And so it is, we're going to come back with very advanced technologies that other civilizations have, of manipulating super energy so that we can duplicate food. We can duplicate a few loaves and a few fishes into enough to feed thousands of people. So this is the divine plan, if you like, for preserving the human species, because actually we are here for a purpose. We are angels in the making. We are being prepared for work in the universe at large. We are valued by the universe, and the events that are happening are not intended to destroy us. They're intended to wake us up, intended to grab our attention so that we pull our noses out of Facebook, pull our noses away from our smartphones, and really focus on the meaning and purpose of life for a moment. So that's the first wave. Now, the second two waves coincide, especially the third wave, with another event that's due. And at the beginning, I spoke about the pole shift, about the way that the North Pole has shifted to the position we now have, in Antarctica. The South Pole was at the Hudson Bay and has now gone to Antarctica, and the North Pole is now in the position of the Arctic Ocean. I mean, it's very bewildering to understand what the hell is going on. Well, I'm about to explain it. At the core of the Earth, the sub-core of the Earth, is a very small black hole. It's a little tiny mini black hole. And it relates, you see, to the gravity. The gravity of the Sun is much greater than the gravity of the Earth. Therefore, the gravity of the Sun, through the gravitational center of the Sun, there's far more energy being released. And therefore, it overcomes the gravity of the Sun much more quickly than occurs in the Earth. And so the cycle in the Sun is 11 years. The Giza cycle in the Earth, because the gravity is smaller, the mass of the Earth is very, very small compared with the Sun. This Giza cycle operates over about 6,500 years. But what happens is that when the energy is released from the gravitational Giza in the Earth, it doesn't break out immediately as it does in the Sun. The gamma rays sort of bounce around in the iron core of the Earth, and all that energy is transformed into heat. So it's a much, much slower process. And then that heat slowly rises through from the center of the Earth. But when it comes up just underneath the crust of the Earth, there's this fist here represents the inner mantle of the Earth, the inner layers, and this is the crust. And what happens is that the consistency of the magma, the molten rock here in the inner layers of the Earth, turns from the consistency of sticky honey, which glues the crust of the Earth to the inner layers, to runny honey, so that we're then on if you like, the crust is floating on the inner levels. Now, I'm going to put my finger through there. That is the pole. So what happens is this. The Earth is spinning, but we're at a 23.5 degree list toward the Sun. And what happens is at the solstice, you see it's like that. The poles, one pole is closer to the Sun than the other pole, which means that the pull of gravity from the Sun's gravity on this pole that's facing the Sun is stronger than on the other. So there's a very real danger that the crust will slide over the pole like so. Okay. And this is what causes a pole shift. The idea is that the crust of the Earth slides over the inner layers, okay? And the pole is the same, but the crust reverses over the pole, which gives us the idea of a pole reversal. But it's not the poles that have reversed, it's our position on the crust of the Earth that's reversed. It's rather like we see the sun moving through the sky, and in the ancient days they thought it was a chariot or something like that. They thought it was the sun moving through the sky. No, it's not the sun that's moving, it's we're moving relative to the sun. And so it is, it's not that the poles shift, it's that we shift relative to the poles. It's the crust slip theory. And again, in my book Awaken, I give a lot of attention to the crust slip theory and the endorsement of Albert Einstein. He endorsed the crust slip theory. So a lot of my work hinges on Albert Einstein, even though I challenge his theory for gravity. So there we are. We've got this crust slip, and it's that crust slip which is a threat to life and limb. And because no civilization could survive the slide of the Earth's crust over the poles, the earthquakes would be just off the Richter scale completely. So the plan for the third wave is 15 minutes before the crust slides, before it goes, because it goes very suddenly and accelerates, is that all children and everyone who wants to participate, all adults will be offered the door of light. And those that go through the door of light will be taken out of physical space and time, along with children. Now, what's interesting with this, at that stage, because of our work in the first wave, organizing people, what we're going to be doing when we come back in the first wave is getting people ready for the third wave. And we'll be organizing people, encouraging people to settle on farms. We'll be organizing the return of the land to the farms. People will be giving us farms because money will have gone with the wipeout of the internet, with the wipeout of electric. There'll be no money because all money is electric transactions. And so people who hold the land will release the land so that thousands of people can settle on the land in tents, however, and each farm community will be, if you like, an ashram. And at the center of each farm community, one of the volunteers who took part in the first wave of ascension will be there as, if you like, a Buddha, an enlightened being. They'll be fully enlightened after the experience of going to the heavens. And their job will be to feed the people in their community and to teach them and to prepare the people for ascension. And what will happen, it'll be a center of light, you see. And for the people that are there and their children, what will happen is that the entire community will be going out of space-time. So this will be into the fourth dimension. So the third wave of ascension is more of an evacuation. At the same time, people who are not in communities who go into the door of light will be taken off planet into a holding situation, into a biosatellite in the fourth dimension, which is invisible to us, but these biosatellites are at hand, and people will be, if you like, protected, lifted out of space and time, whilst the planet is cleansed by the pole shift. You see, continents will be rising, continents will be forming, falling. Tsunamis will be sweeping across the face of the earth. The speed of the hurricanes will be sufficient to slice the tops off mountains, if you like. It's going to be quite dramatic, and that the planet will not be suitable for human survival at that time of transition. So anyone who chooses not to ascend or not to be evacuated at that time, who chooses not to go into the light, they have to go through the death process. Well, if you don't ascend, you die. It doesn't matter really when people die or how they die. That's pure sentimentality. The fact is the planet comes first. The planet comes before the species on the planet. And the planet has to be cleansed for the sake of all the other species that we're wiping out. The planet has to be cleansed of our civilization. And then the whole cycle starts again. It's a new golden age, a new time, a wonderful time is coming, because what will happen is when we are lifted out of this dimension into another dimension, we're lifted out of the stream of time that we're in. So the passage of time here has no bearing there. So we'd have the experience of being out for a short period of time, but when we come back, when the dome of light that we will have been perceived ourselves to be in, the dome of light over the farm community, when it melts away, the people will find they're surrounded by lush, verdant forest, because 100 years will have passed. The earth will have cooled down. The rivers will be flowing again, clean and free, you see. So much more time will have passed in the third dimension than in the fourth or the fifth dimension, where the people are going to. So this is the idea of many, many people will be returning to the earth that were taken out of space-time. There will be a great cull of the population of the planet, because many, many people will choose not to go into the light and will just go on to their next phase of evolution on other planets, incarnating into other situations. But many, many people that have gone through an ascension process into the fifth dimension, the evacuation is into the fourth dimension, but those in the first and second wave who go into the fifth dimension, they have a different destiny. Now, in the second wave of ascension, people will be going into the fifth dimension with their bodies. At the third wave, those people that went in the first wave and didn't take their bodies will be lifted out of physical space and time. They will go through a physical ascension at the time of the third wave. But they will go into the fifth dimension. They'll go into a level above the fourth dimension. So most of the children and adults who are not ready for the next stage, for a full ascension, they come back to the earth just to continue. The people in the fifth dimension step into the ascension flame, and in that process we become angels, because I teach in my work that the planet Earth is the womb of angels. It's a place for the gestation of angels, and also for the for the advancement of angels, because many people at the moment who are incarnate archangels and angels are destined to become seraphim, which is the highest level of angels. Now, you have to understand that I'm just working with this religious model, with this angelic model, but if you think about angels as being extraterrestrials, then you could work with the model that David Wilcock works with of extraterrestrial civilizations. And it's all the same. It's just a different way of modeling. I like to work with a religious model because, I was brought up in religion and I feel comfortable with it, and I'm appealing to all those who do like the religious model. But if you don't like the religious model, don't worry. Just read the work of David Wilcock and get into the extraterrestrial model and think UFOs and think ETs and think, of more advanced civilizations in the universe. Because we're proposing in this new physics as a way that you can travel between the galaxies. So, but anyway, what happens when you go through the ascension process and you graduate as an angel, you will then be going from here, from the planet, our solar system, towards the solar system of Arcturus, which in the Hebrew was called Ash. And that's where I come from. That's where I get my direction from. And we'll be going there to receive our assignments in the universe at large, because for many of us, what this planet is an angel-making factory, but it's a training ground for preparing beings for management positions in the universe. We're in an expanding universe, and their management is required. And one of the best places in the universe for really putting spiritual beings through their paces is to incarnate them in the physical form as human beings, where we go through difficulty, challenge, and adversity. And this helps us in our angelic evolution. So there is a divine purpose in all of this. So I encourage you to get to my website and to recognize get to my website and get a copy of Awaken, get the new version of Awaken. I've got a new version where, if you had the old version, the physics was at the front and all the spiritual stuff was at the back, and it was very difficult to read if you weren't a scientist or a physicist. So what I've done is I've changed it around. And I've got all the ascension material and all the stuff on angels and near-death experiences and reincarnation and alternative medicine and homeopathy and healing, all this, and Sai Baba and all these subjects, pertaining to spiritual interest, are at the front of the book, along with explaining crop circles, crop formations, UFOs, extraterrestrials. And there's a huge amount in this book. So, and then the physics is at the end, and the physics gives substance to what I'm talking about, because everything I speak about is backed by the physics, including a scientific account for God. God is perceived not as some being on a higher dimension, but rather as the consciousness underlying all beings. So it's the consciousness that gives rise to the entire universe, because the universe is more like a dream than a material reality. And so what we imagine to be God is more like the dreamer. But you see, the point is we are that dreamer. We are that one divine being in the many bodies. That's what the human being is. So if you like, we are all expressions of that principle we call God, or that principle we call the divine. And that's what's so amazing, is we've got innate within us knowledge of everything. We're here on an adventure. We're here to have a human experience. And so again, I've got loads of songs on my website. Go onto the website and download some of the songs, and just indulge in the inspiration. And a lot of the material is free to download. And also, I have my nutritional products as well. My Vital Cell Wonder Food, which is a way of really preparing your cells for physical ascension. So I'll leave you there, and thank you very much for your attention. It's been quite a long session, this one, nearly an hour, but I hope you've enjoyed it, and farewell, my dear friends. And before I leave you, I do want to say that this is September I'm speaking to you from, but I'm planning through the winter to be doing a series of fireside meditations and teachings. So to continue this theme, but with music and meditation, I'm going to get a new camera, new iPhone, a better camera, and set this whole scene up with the fire beside me, and just as a fireside chat, if you see what I mean. I want to do a series on that theme. So stay tuned to my channel, and I hope to have a lot more in store for you very soon. So until we meet again, stay well, my dear friends. Namaste.